Well, at this point, I want to show you a little bit more about creating your own little custom shapes and working with the path tools as well. Here's a great way that you can take something that is based on a photograph and turn it into a great little illustration, vector drawing that you can use with the vector tools and the custom shapes. So again, you don't have to be a great illustrator nowadays simply because you've got a lot of potential to work with just dealing with imagery. And you can find imagery all over the web. There's a lot of free images that you can use through Creative Commons or any of the other websites that allow for that type of licensing. Or you could even find some images in the browse menu of Photoshop's own stock photos. So nevertheless, as I mentioned, here we have a very simple image of a bare tree. But what I want to be doing is converting this into a black and white illustration. And really, I'm just concerned with the tree itself, although maybe we could even grab a little bit of the grass. So let me walk you through the steps on how to do just that. So the first thing that we're going to do is to try and convert this into something that's a little bit more easily selectable. In other words, what I really want to try and do is just convert this thing into more of a black and white image that we can sort of play around with. There's any number of different ways that we can manage this inside of Photoshop. One of the first things that you can try and do is to just work with brightness and contrast. You can use Legacy if you're used to working with older versions of Photoshop, or as you can see here, I can just try and increase some of the brightness, increase some of that contrast, maybe bring down some of that brightness and look for more of that contrast, right? I really want to see some of these leafy greens in there. Well, actually there's no greens, but sort of the branches a little bit better. So that's just the start of things. We can then go to image adjustments. You can even play with levels, right? As you can see here, I can sort of blow out these levels so that the midpoints, the bright points in here are sort of brought in a little bit closer, and by doing that you control a little bit more about the contrast of the images and how they're sort of being perceived inside of Photoshop. As you can see here, I'm just trying to get a little bit more detail in these areas. Well, now that that's done, we can then try to go into our adjustments and we can try something called threshold. And threshold will convert this into our black and white image that we're looking for. I can even come in here and clean up a couple of areas, but notice with that threshold, you can also control a little bit more about how dark or bright these things are going to become. So notice I'm just sliding this along and I'm sort of bringing it to about this point. Well, at this stage, we can crop out the section that we want to keep. Notice. And I'm going to go in there and I'm going to clean up some of these areas that we're going to be playing with in just a second. So notice here there's a good portion of this. You could certainly mask it out, but in this case it's going to be rather permanent. I'm just going to use a simple eraser tool. Not always my tool of choice, but in this case I think it'll work just fine for us. Notice I'm just going in there, and if you ever make a mistake, just Control Z to get out of that. Notice here I'm just coming in and eliminating all of this extra space. By the way, the square bracket is the shortcut to increase the size of your brush. And as you can see here, I'm just going in and cleaning up a little bit of the elements. Left square bracket to reduce the size of your brush. You can also like come in here and take out some of these little dots if you don't really want them. So what you're going to end up with is sort of like this black and white imagery that you have here. At this point, it's really easy to go in there and make a selection with the magic wand tool. And as you can see, I've got a selection of all of this black area. Let's say, for example, you just wanted the tree. I could have, made sure that the selection did not include the bottom portion here. But I don't mind that so much, so I'm leaving it in place. At this point, check it out. We're going to go to our paths. And what I want to do, as you can see here, is to make a work path from the selection. So I've got that selection, marching ants going around there, and now I make a work path based on that selection. So as you can see here, we've got a work path. With this work path now selected, I can come in here and say, Edit, Define Custom Shape. So now these trees are going to be part of my custom shape. So I'll call this the bare tree custom shape. Well, at this point, we don't even need to save this stuff. And I can come to a blank new canvas, and using the vector tools, and look, this is the custom shape tool, which if I press down on my vector tools here, the rectangle tool is a default, but I want the custom shape tool. Sorry about that. So here's another way to access it. And look, at the very bottom of your list, what do you have? That new tree that you've just created. And check it out. You can, sorry, let me just try that again. At this point, you can create that object, as many of them as you wish. Notice you've got in your layer palette, I'll get rid of this small one. You've got that shape. It can be whatever color you want. Notice how nice it looks as a vector file. It's really worked out quite well for us. And you can change this to whatever color you want. Remember how we did that with our basic shapes, right? So these can be really easily adapted into any kind of design inside Photoshop. And as I said, need not have to require a good amount of skill as an illustrator. Just take any kind of image and you can turn it into a vector shape for yourself.